Deleted Peppa Pig episode The Hungry Night, which was never showed on TV. One stormy night, lightning flashed outside Peppa and George's bedroom. Mummy Pig was tidying toys, while Daddy Pig read his newspaper in his chair. Peppa played with her blocks, and George drove his toy dinosaur in circles. Suddenly, George began to breathe heavily. His eyes turned completely black, 2 shiny holes in his pink face. Peppa only giggled. "You look silly, George." A moment later, George lunged for a plate of cookies, devouring them without chewing. His breathing grew desperate. His eyes stayed totally dark. George wandered to the window, staring silently into the rain. Then he began to change. His teeth grew long and sharp, and his arms turned greenish. He shuffled out the door into the yard, moving like a puppet. Daddy Pig called after him, worried. "George, come back in." But George spun around and, snarling, bit Daddy Pig's leg. Daddy screamed and fell. Peppa nearly fell into George's jaws as he lunged at her. She scrambled away, hiding behind the door as George shuffled closer, grunting. Suddenly, he jumped out and Peppa tumbled to the floor in terror. That night, Peppa couldn't sleep. By morning, Daddy Pig was gone. Only Mummy Pig remained, trying the phone, but the line was dead. Frightened, Peppa hid under her bed. That's when George appeared, now fully green, eyes empty and wide, grinning a twisted, hungry smile. He lunged, and Peppa's last sight was her brother's zombie face as darkness closed in. Deleted Peppa Pig. Episode Peppa and the Sandbox Stranger, which was never showed on TV. One evening, Peppa and George were playing in the sandbox. It was getting dark, but they didn't want to go home. "One last castle, then home," said Peppa. When they finished, Peppa noticed someone else sitting nearby. A stranger. He was very pale, with black eyes that had no pupils, and on his head was a strange, crooked crown made of sticks and grass. "Who are you?" asked Peppa. He looked at her and whispered, "I used to live here, until they took my toy." Peppa turned. George was already walking toward the house. When she turned back, the strange boy was gone. The next morning, the sandbox had been dug up. In the center stood a little cross made of sticks, and beneath it, an old, soft toy, one that looked very much like Peppa. That night, when Peppa woke up, she saw sand right next to her bed, and nearby, tiny hoof prints, bare. Deleted Peppa Pig episode Peppa's Tooth Fairy, which was never showed on TV. One night, Peppa lost a tooth. "Yay, the Tooth Fairy will bring me a present," she said happily, and placed the tooth under her pillow. When the clock struck 3:33, a faint rustling filled Peppa's room, a barely audible buzzing sound like wings. Peppa slightly opened her eyes and saw something floating near her bed. It looked like a fairy, but it wore a black crown and a mouth far too wide, filled with sharp teeth. "Are you the Tooth Fairy?" Peppa whispered. The creature leaned closer and whispered back, "Yes, sweetie, I've come for your little tooth. But you know, only good children get presents." Dozens of old, rotten teeth spilled out from under its dress. Carefully, it placed them into a little sack. "And for you, other gifts," it giggled. In the morning, there was no present under Peppa's pillow, just someone else's tooth, black, cracked. Peppa tried to tell her parents, but her mouth wouldn't open anymore. Her lips were sewn shut with a thin black thread, and on the bedside table sat a note. "Thank you for the exchange. See you next time. F." Deleted Peppa Pig episode George's Dinosaur, which was never showed on TV. When George was very little, he never parted with his green dinosaur. He slept with it, ate next to it, went for walks with it, took it into the bath, and even tried to feed it porridge. "Dinosaur," he would happily shout every day. Sometimes Peppa would tease him. "You're such a baby, always clinging to your toy." But George would only frown and hug the dinosaur even tighter. Years passed. George grew up. He was too old to sleep with toys now. He started playing football, building with blocks, and got into using his tablet. The dinosaur began to annoy him. It lay forgotten on the floor while George played on his tablet. One day, he threw the dinosaur into the trash bin outside. That night, George woke up. The room was quiet, but something felt off. He felt a chill. Creak, creak. A familiar shape slipped out of the shadows. Green, torn seams, one eye dangled from a thread. "Dinosaur," it rasped. George trembled. You're just a toy." "You left me," the dinosaur croaked. "We were always together." Deleted Peppa Pig episode, The Guest at the Door, which was never showed on TV. One evening, Peppa was left home alone. Mommy and Daddy had gone into town for shopping, and George was sleeping in his crib. The house was quiet, too quiet. Bang, bang, bang. Someone knocked at the door. Peppa flinched. She tiptoed to the door. "Who's there?" "It's me, Peppa. Open up, granddaughter." The voice was familiar but muffled, distant. She opened the door. Standing on the doorstep was Grandpa Pig, soaked, his face pale as if the rain had washed it clean. His clothes were the very ones he was buried in 3 years ago. "Gee, Grandpa," Peppa whispered, "but you're... Don't be afraid, I just came to visit." He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. He stepped inside. Water dripped from him onto the floor. "Put the kettle on, granddaughter. I'm cold." But while Peppa was boiling the water, she heard a rasping noise from the living room. He was standing there, changing. His skin was peeling off like soaked fabric. His arms stretched unnaturally. His eyes had turned black. His face had grown long, fish-like. From his mouth came a gurgle. "You forgot me, but I remembered you every single day." Under the water, Peppa screamed and ran to the door, but the lock wouldn't budge. Behind her, Grandpa was no longer Grandpa. He was something else, wet, trembling, with rotting seaweed on his shoulders. He reached out. "Come with me. It's deep and quiet." When her parents returned, the house was empty. Only footprints, wet ones, leading to the bathroom. And on the mirror, something was written. "Granddaughter is with me. Don't miss her." Deleted Peppa Pig episode, Don't Step in the Puddle, which was never showed on TV. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to see more interesting videos. Peppa once loved jumping in muddy puddles. It was her favorite thing to do. But one day, everything changed. In an episode no one ever saw on TV, it was pouring rain. Peppa woke up alone. George was gone, and so were her parents. Outside, everything was flooded. The yard was drowning in strange purple puddles, deeper than usual, far too deep. Peppa stepped outside, let out a happy snort, and jumped into the first puddle. But instead of a cheerful splash, there was a dull, sucking sound. The puddle pulled her body down deeper. Hee, that's not funny," Peppa said. "Let go." But the puddle only pulled harder. Suddenly, a face rose from the water. It looked like hers, but with no eyes and a stretched mouth. It spoke. "One jump, and you stay forever." shadows began rising from the puddle. First Daddy, then George. "Jump with us, Peppa. We're family." The puddle dragged her even deeper, and then she began to change into a monster. The last thing she saw was the sky. Since then, in every episode, if you look closely at the puddles, you can see a face. And if a child stares at the screen too long, tiny reflections appear in their eyes too. Small, wet, and calling them to jump. Deleted Peppa Pig episode, Snouts for Breakfast, which was never showed on TV. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to see more interesting videos. One day, Daddy Pig got up before dawn. He wanted to surprise the family, to prepare a perfect breakfast like in the best hotels. He quietly tiptoed to the kitchen, tied on his apron, took out a frying pan and whispered, "Today will be perfect." A little later, Peppa woke up. The room was strangely quiet, as if the world was holding its breath. She stretched, yawned, and suddenly felt something terrible. "My snout!" She ran to George's room. He was sitting in bed, trembling, his face smooth, like a doll's. "Peppa, I can't smell my dinosaur." Mummy Pig came out of the bedroom. Her eyes were full of horror. What is happening?" On the stove, a frying pan was sizzling. Inside it, 4 snouts, pink, crackling, with thin golden brown edges. And next to it stood Daddy Pig. On his face was a brand new snout, pink and carefully sewn on with thick black thread. He smiled. "Breakfast is ready, family." Deleted Peppa Pig episode, Full Moon in the Forest, which was never showed on TV. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to see more interesting videos. One day, the pig family decided to go on a joint picnic with the wolf family. In the morning, Daddy Pig called his best friend and shared the idea. They immediately agreed, and both families set off for the countryside. "Look at this beautiful forest, the perfect place. Fresh air, the scent of the woods," said Daddy Pig. "We're so glad you invited us. It's nice to finally get out into nature," added Mummy Wolf. The men lit a campfire. Mummy Wolf served homemade pastries, and the wolf children played tag. But when the sun disappeared behind the trees, the atmosphere changed. The wind grew sharp. The temperature dropped. Somewhere in the distance, a lonely creature howled. "It's just a fox," said Daddy Wolf, but his eyes glinted with a strange light. "Let's stay the night. We brought tents," suggested Mummy Wolf. "It'll be so fun under the full moon." Mummy Pig hesitated, then nodded. At 12:03 a.m., Peppa woke up to rustling sounds. Peeking through a slit in the tent, she saw the silhouettes of the wolves. They were standing with their backs turned, heads lifted to the sky. Their bodies twitched, stretched, bones cracked. Then came the howl, long, ravenous. Daddy Pig burst out of the tent. "What the—" But he didn't get to finish. A figure lunged from the darkness and sank its teeth into his neck. "Thanks for the dinner and the warm welcome," whispered the head of the wolf family.